Hey everyone, it's your girl Rajette Speaks. Welcome to another episode of Narrative Shifts. This is our second episode. Say two, everybody. It's our second. This is a space that is safe and it's a space where we are redesigning and reframing narratives that go out about us. And so today you will recognize my two guests if you paid attention or you were watching the first episode. We decided to have a second part to this thing. There were some things that came up in the first episode that we wanted to kind of dive a little deeper in. We know that the first episode was pretty heavy. There were some things that came out that were pretty deep. And, if you were watching, we know that it may have moved you in a certain type of way. We also know that some people were really blessed by it. We've gotten some good feedback, actually, from the first episode. So just thank you. Stick around. Every episode is not about loss. Every episode is not about grieving and therapy. We're in a series right now. And so I decided to kick off Narrative Shifts with a four or five part series that focused on Black men and mental health. And so, if it's something that you find is too heavy for you right now, that's totally understandable. But just come back. We have some really cool things lined up in terms of leadership. We've got some really cool people doing amazing things in some amazing spaces. And that's the whole point of Narrative Shifts, so that we can see ourselves in these spaces that we don't always see ourselves in. And then as other people are viewing us outside of our communities, they're seeing us in these spaces as well. And we are no longer seen as an anomaly, right? So that's the point of Narrative Shifts. And I want us to move forward in this. It is more than just a show. There are some things that are building around it. But all of that said, thank you for joining us again. Again, we meet weekly. I'll see you weekly in the broadcast space at 7:00 on Mondays. If you missed the live, you definitely can find us on a rebroadcast or a restream. So you're not going to miss anything. There's a YouTube page. There's the Vimeo page. We're here. Definitely, Facebook Live, we're doing those things. So thank you for joining us. Today, we have back with us Desmond Smith. Hey, Des.
What up? How you doing?
I'm doing pretty well, thank you. And we got Shanta Hayes. How's it going?
Hi, doing well.
Good. So we are just going to keep it kind of casual. We probably won't be on a full, 1 hour episode today, but we are going to just talk about a few things that came up that were highlighted a bit from the last episode. And then also just kind of talk a little bit about some strategies and these types of things that are really necessary and important when you are going through your own sort of healing process. Okay. So we're not in this episode going to dive too deep into the actual loss that, Desmond experienced. You'll have to catch the first episode for that. But we are going to kind of talk about a few things around that. Okay. So I guess I'll start with Des. I got a couple of questions here, and I'm a jotter, so you're going to see me doing this and looking off to the side. I have notes everywhere. But Desmond, I want to know what you would say to Black men who are maybe on the fence about attending therapy or going to get some help. Maybe they're dealing with something personal. Maybe they're dealing with loss. Maybe they're dealing with a divorce. Maybe they're dealing with a job transition. Anything, right? Where there may be emotions that rise up that might be a little bit misplaced or displaced. Like, what would you say to somebody who might be on the fence about attending therapy?
I would say to anyone, but specifically to Black men, like, just try it. Like, you go for checkups and you go to other professionals for services. You get your lawn taken care of. You get your teeth done at the dentist every 6 months. You go to the doctor's office to get checked up when you feel like something's not right. When you feel like something's not right internally in your heart or in your mind, you really need to go get checked out. Like, go talk to somebody that's certified, that's trained, and has the tools to help you. Like, do it. Like, why not? It'll only help you feel better, and eventually come out with some strategies, and you'll become a better person for it. You may even help, your family in the long run when it comes down to it. So I would strongly encourage you to go and get some support, get some assistance, get some help.
I appreciate that response. And one of the things that you just said is that, you might help somebody. And so, so I think sometimes we forget that the way we live on this earth is, and we don't always like this, the things that we go through often, once we get on the other side of those things, serves as a help to someone else.
Right.
Now, I know everybody doesn't have the same belief set and this kind of thing. And I don't know, even, anyone who doesn't believe in God or whomever, that, look, do you, but you have to know that we're connected on this planet. You have to know that connections exist. And so in a moment when, man, I'm going through something that's real crap right now, and it might be really difficult to overcome or get through it. Nobody's trying to hear at that time, like, okay, I'm going through this with somebody else. That no one wants to hear that. We hear it because we're conditioned to saying that it's going to be all right. It's going to help somebody else. You don't want to hear that when you're in the middle of something.
Nah.
Right? You made a reference in the first episode, where you guys were bleeding out, and I thought that was just a powerful, powerful analogy. No one wants to be dealing with the fact that their bleeding out can help somebody else later.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Reality, though, and I think we all can agree with this, is that once we do overcome something, it does have the ability to help someone. And so, I love that you just shared that. Shanta, so if you could also, kind of from your perspective, the clinician side of things, what would you say to some people who might be on the fence, and what kind of barriers do you often see in the field with people who can't or feel like they can't actually connect in that way?
So that was like 15 questions in one. So I'm trying to
That was
break
two
down.
questions. That was two questions.
And
You're a whole therapist. You hear whole dissertations of questions. Go ahead.
But the whole thing is barriers. So barriers can be few and far between, or they could be numerous. They could be just as ambiguous as why is the sky blue? But a lot of times we see, Des talked about, I love to talk about routine maintenance as part of self-care. He was saying you do it like if you had a toothache, you go to a dentist, if you're not feeling good, you go to a doctor. However, we have not normalized, and granted, even medical and dental care in some communities is not normalized to the point where if you're experiencing pain, you seek out help.
Right.
So we really need to get to a place where seeking help for mental, emotional, behavioral health issues is something that we do, that we think of as something that is external and not just something that is taken care of within the family or within the community, right? Yes, it takes a village, a whole village, big village to raise a child. That village should include healthcare professionals, dental professionals, and mental health professionals. We educators. My children's educators have been called part of my family because, they see my child so much, my children. They see behaviors that I might not see. And I work primarily in school settings. So teachers see some behaviors that you might not see.
Absolutely.
And I would behoove you not to say, oh, Timmy wouldn't do that. Because I saw Timmy kick the teacher. I saw it. I saw it. Okay?
Right.
Timmy is not always quiet.
Yeah.
Timmy be turning up. Timmy threw that chair. I saw it.
Right.
But also there are we don't talk about anything that happens in our house outside our house. So when you are conditioned with that type of language, when you're programmed with that type of language as a child, that becomes a core belief that you have as an adult. We don't talk about this outside our house. So we really do have to normalize the idea of seeking outside help.
So Shanta, when I hear you say normalize it, what are some action steps? Because I'm hearing you say that we can have, the full village is involved. We know that we need a therapist. We need, all these people in our lives. But what are some action steps about actually normalizing that behavior? Like, what can we individually do? Because, of course, as a collective, we're trying to drive this thing. I know for me, this is one of my passion areas. Like, let's normalize this thing. Let's destigmatize this thing. But individually, if each of us had a part in this thing, which we do, as to form the collective, how do we normalize this in actionable ways?
Well, we have to talk about it. So I've talked about communication. And just like for therapists, for teachers, you document where it didn't happen, right? But parents, we have to document stuff. We have to document behaviors. We have to question behaviors, and then vocabulary. So vocabulary goes back to the communication. Now, what's wrong with you? Why did you break the lamp? Why did you kick the dog? Why did you not? What's your problem? So it goes back to how we communicate things with people, how we address issues with them. And again, that we don't talk about things that starts when you're young. So that conditioning, that programming, that language is important. The way we frame things. So we have to shift the narrative, how we communicate with our children, what messages we're trying to send to them. So if you want to send the message that it is a normal, because that's really, not a word I choose to use, but an acceptable thing to talk about what you're feeling. We have to create spaces where it's safe for them to talk about their feelings. Do you really want to talk about your feelings to someone who is accusing you of something before they even know what the backstory is? Typically, most people are going to shut down when they are provoked or antagonized or being interrogated. And though we don't like to say it, many people are going to lie to cover. That's why small children lie. I don't want to be in trouble.
Right.
It's like, what do I need to do not to get in trouble? No, I didn't do that. Holding the marker right here in my hand. I did not write on my face.
Right.
I didn't do it. A marker. I saw, it was like the cutest little video. Little girl, why did you write on your face? I didn't write on my face. There's a marker in your hand. Oh, there's a marker? Oh, it's like plausible deniability is out the window. Oh, girl was like, I ain't do it. Didn't want to be in trouble. But that's based on a history of behaviors that came before. So we really have to set a foundation. We have to choose our words very intentionally. We have to talk to our children based on their development, based on their age, based on their level of comprehension. Because some 3-year-olds can articulate a whole lot better than some 15, 16, 20-year-olds.
True.
So we set the foundation by giving them the vocabulary, by communicating with them, by making it acceptable to express themselves, and doing that by letting them know this is a safe place where you can do that.
That's great. Thank you.
Well, that was my dissertation. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Go ahead, Des. You want to chime in?
I was just saying that has to start young, like speaking to your children and encouraging them to advocate for themselves. Like, when my daughter was young, actually when I was working out in another district, and the principal always encouraged students to advocate for themselves. I'm like, why you want to hear what these kids? I'm like, oh, why wouldn't we want to hear what these kids have to say? And then I took that home. Like, you know what? I need you to talk to me. Like, tell me how you're feeling. Tell me why this happened. And then like actually sit and listen.
Yes. Like
a lot of our children, they're afraid to say anything because they already know what the outcome is going to be, and it's going to be some trouble. But if they have a safe place and they can explain what happened and why they did it, that just opens up the door for more and better communication and a healthier relationship.
Let's talk a little bit more about this, guys. So obviously I've got some questions here and some bullets, but I like where we are right now with this. So I'm hearing both of you. What do we do with a viewer, who may be watching and like, okay, that's fine, but I'm working 2 jobs. I'm working 3 jobs to try to put food on the table. I'm a single parent, and I don't have time to have these discussions, or I don't see everything that's happening right in the day. What do you say to that parent in terms of that communication piece with their kid?
Okay. May I?
Please.
So I am a school-based community therapist, which means I go into homes. I'm primarily in schools, so I see kids in the school settings. Prior to COVID, of course. In COVID, it's virtual. depending on certain therapist comfort levels, they may be back in homes. That is their choice. But to those parents, structure and routines are very important, right? Mm-hmm. And while you may not see your child as much as you would like due to, fulfilling your other responsibilities and obligations as a parent, the way you create space and time, those conversations you have when you're in the car or on the bus, in transit from one place to the other, the way you do your bedtime routines or your wake up routines, creating these elements that say, oh, this is a safe space. Mm-hmm. This is somebody I can talk to. I can tell her Jaden kicked me under my desk while I was coloring or whatever. But you have to be very intentional. You have to create that structure. You have to develop those spaces. And that is a very intentional thing. And when your teachers tell you that Jaden kicked somebody under the table because they had the red crayon and he wanted it, listen, please don't push back. Please don't say, Jaden, don't do that at home. Jaden don't have no siblings at home.
Right.
Right. That's a great point.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Or Jaden's sibling is 15. He
right.
5. He kicking him. So let's be open. Let's listen, not just to our kids, but to the people who interact with our kids on a daily basis, right? That other caregiver, that auntie, that grandma, that you have to, the village has to communicate. Mm-hmm. And pay attention when those notes come home. Don't just leave them in the backpack, just stuff down in there. Yeah, take them out, got to read them. Yeah. Go from there.
That's good. That's really
because good. Schools do offer services.
Absolutely.
School counselors, school social workers, they make referrals to people like me.
Okay. Thank you. Des, did you want to chime in? So for anybody who doesn't know Desmond is a principal in Michigan, in Redford, Michigan. And, that was in the first episode. But what can you speak to in terms of that? Because obviously you see a ton of things as a principal. And you were teaching high school for how many years did you teach high school?
8 years.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So you've seen quite a bit, overall in dealing with our youth. So, what can you add to what Shanta has just said?
I mean, I was, when she was speaking, it was like resonating. Like all I can do is echo what she said. Like a lot of times it's the routines and creating those spaces. Like, it's funny that she was saying on the ride home, because that was some of our most intimate conversations with my oldest daughter was on the ride home from school every day, because she knew that I was picking her up from school. We would have at least 15 minutes to have a conversation. Sometimes we would stop. Every Friday we had a routine. Every Friday we would stop and get slushies, right? And she knew that we were getting slushies, and she was excited about it, and she would talk about what happened during school. But every day I picked her up, no matter what. Like I was working 35 minutes away. I'll leave work. I go pick her up from school. She knew I was going to be there in the car right line. I would pick her up, and she had time with daddy. And she used that time to express whatever was going on. And now that she's older, she's a teenager, Lord Jesus. So now she's a teenager. She doesn't express as much to me as she used to, because she has her mom now, and her mom can dig into those other conversations that she doesn't really want to have with her dad. But she still talks to me about a lot of stuff. We still have time after school. It's funny. She's a student in my own building. So she can come and see me like anytime she wants. She's with me like 24/7. It's great for her sometimes, and sometimes it sucks for her. But creating those spaces, and she knows boundaries. She knows when is the time to have those conversations. And I know also when those times are. And sometimes I know that I can't have that conversation with her. I just can't. So like I'll say something to her mom. I'm like, babe, you need to talk to her about X, Y, or Z. And then my wife is like, got it. And then within like an hour, they've had that conversation because my wife can create that environment a lot better than I can, because I'm a dad and she's a nurturing mother.
Got you. Okay. Yeah. That's really good, and I'm glad you guys are speaking about that routine. Its structure is so huge. And, you know, for anyone who doesn't really know me in this space, I'm an educator. I teach middle school math. And, you know, so it's interesting that we all kind of have a connection in the school system. So we do see quite a bit. And it's remembering, like what Shanta said, you know, it's think about when we were kids, you know, we may have had a decent upbringing, may have had, you know, supportive, positive parents, maybe not. I don't know everybody's, you know, like backdrop. However, we had teachers that we confided in when we were kids. And so maybe something our parent didn't know, maybe something we just felt safe in certain, you know, with certain teachers, right, with the proper boundaries. And, you know, it's interesting because those teachers and us, obviously the three of us have been in this dynamic where we're the recipient of people, these young children who share things with us. And it's like, okay, we know what might be going on at home, whereas, you know, they may not share that with their own parent. And so it takes us in our role also, you know, to make sure that we obviously are the safe space, obviously working within the bounds of we're mandated reporters if anything critical comes up. That's super important. And then also making sure that we are the listeners, because maybe at home they don't have someone who is going to just listen. Just listen.
Right.
They may not have that. So that's just, you know, that's a little nugget, I think, for anybody who's just listening. I think that routine and that structure is so very important. It's important to be present. And I'm not a parent, guys, but I'm talking to people. I've got nieces, nephews, little cousins, the whole thing. Obviously, I have a bunch of kids in my classroom. Who got to tell people like, oh yeah, I got kids. Trust that. But one of the things that I sometimes see, you know, I would sometimes be outside for pickup, you know, for the kids coming, and I would see parents who are, and this is no slam on the parents, but it's just something to be mindful of, you know, kicking back to what Shanta said earlier, and Desmond, you know, with him, you know, picking up his kids. I would be outside managing or facilitating the pickup with some of my coworkers, and I would see parents pick their kids up, and the parents are already doing a million things. So they might be on the phone, and maybe there's food in the back seat, you know, they're just trying to manage, you know, that drive home. But I most often saw parents who just picked their kids up, but these parents were just on the phone. And so when I think about that being present, right, that creating that routine, that creating the structure of this is the time that we can have the most intimate discussions on the way home, right, or on the way to school. You know, if we just create that structure, if we create that routine, that is, you know, maybe the only time that some of our parents will have with their kids, because maybe it's, I got to do this pickup and then I got to go to the other school across town to do this other pickup. And then I got to get home, get them situated really quickly, maybe drop them off at grandma's house. And then I got to go to my other job. You know, I'm thinking about my demographic where I teach. And that is a very common occurrence. And so they might not get the opportunity at home to have the dialogues, right? Or to really dig in. You just know that when your child got in the car, teacher, I'm walking over to the car like, look, he got in trouble today.
Right.
He might be suspended for 2 days, you know, and now all of a sudden he's getting jacked up in the car by mom or dad or whomever, or uncle or whomever, because he just got in trouble. So now there's no expression, there's no moment where this kid can express what was happening. And to your point earlier, you know, it's almost like a fear, like, well, I can't now, you know, I'm in trouble again. I was just in trouble 3 hours ago. And now I'm getting jacked up in the car, right? And so I think that routine is very important. So I do appreciate you guys both speaking to that element. A couple of questions here. So Des, you know, what kinds of patterns have you seen in young Black boys who don't have an outlet to heal when they're faced with some things? You know, obviously you see the expression of anger. And I want to kind of go back a little bit to what you mentioned in the first episode about some anger that was coming out, the symptom of the trauma that was coming out in you, and your coworker seeing this. Your coworker kind of like, hey, grabbing you up, like, you know, what's going on?
Right.
Giving you the space to kind of, you know, share a little bit. But for you, again, it was symptoms just oozing out everywhere that people weren't used to seeing. And so now, obviously, you're in a role where you see young Black boys all the time,
right,
who are angry, who might be frustrated, who don't know how to maybe express themselves in a way to articulate what's going on. And that's teenagers, period. Like that's, oh, I don't know how to get it out. They don't know how to really, they're not necessarily equipped with that ability to express, in these layered ways yet. But what is it, I guess, how do you deal with, young Black boys? What is something that you do dealing with them in terms of their anger, these expressions that come out, and what are some strategies you think as someone in your role to offer?
That's wow. So in my role as an assistant principal at one point, and now as a building principal, it's a little different as a building principal because you're kind of pulled away from students more than you'd like to be. But I still interact with a lot of students, and I see a number of things with my black young men that have gone through trauma or going through trauma or they've gone through something, right? Like you said, anger. Some of them like literally just lie and just randomly make up some stuff. They runners, they scream, they throw stuff. They just, it's just a number of things that happen, and you don't have time to go research. What do I do about this situation? So literally all we can do is sit down, try to create an environment where they feel safe, and then allow them to find a way to express themselves. I mean, I've been in my office and boy, like picked up a picture that I had in my office that was framed with, a glass frame, and just knocked into it, and glass is breaking. I'm sitting there like, this boy done broke my stuff.
Wow.
But it's not about my stuff, right?
Right.
It's about creating an environment and giving him a safe place away from the commotion, right? Away from the noise, a quiet, safe space. And then eventually he's able to de-escalate. I don't know what is there to help de-escalate him. So I have to try a number of things. Speaking softly, turning on some soft music, or it can be loud music. I don't know. It can be a number of things. Giving them something to throw, giving them something to write. I try a number of things. And some of them work, some of them don't. A lot of times when it comes to our Black boys, they don't want to talk to anybody other than a Black man, right? Or someone that they feel is someone that they can trust. Because in education, let's be honest, it's a bunch of white women, right? And these women don't always quite want to hear or understand where they're coming from. It's not that they don't want to, sometimes they just don't understand. And then also teachers, they don't often have time to slow down and have that conversation, right? Sure. Teachers have 150 students to worry about and to work on and to deal with. And then there's this one, right? And I trust me, I honor teachers as often as I can. Like, teachers worth their weight in gold, literally. So what do you do? So that this young man comes down, and you have to slow down, like everything stops. You have to give him all of your attention. You can't sit there and be looking at your email and answering the phone. You got to give him all the attention. Allow him time to eventually cycle down, and then hopefully have that conversation. That's typically what I try to do. Most of the time it works. That's
awesome. Shanta, did you want to add to that a little bit?
I would, and shameless plug here. So part of my personal business is to partner with schools to help create safe spaces where students can go to find that tool, that resource to help them de-escalate. But not only students, those teachers who are worth their weight in gold. Yeah. Because a lot of times we don't acknowledge the fact that our teachers are experiencing some trauma in the place where they go to work and to serve.
Yes.
So we need to create spaces for them as well. So that's what SL Hayes Group does, is we partner with them to create those, trauma-informed spaces in trainings for educators so they can continue to do their job without pouring from an empty cup.
Mm.
But Desmond said a very important thing. That attention, right? I'm sorry. I'm going to put a pin in that. I'll go back to the top because the initial question was, what do we see? And what we see are behaviors.
Yeah.
Right? Because just clinically speaking, you have these thoughts, you don't know what to do with them, experience these feelings. Where am I going to go?
Right.
And that leads to behaviors. Right? So that's what we're having.
Yeah.
Confusion, anger, frustration. I don't know how to express myself. I don't have the words. I don't have the vocabulary. Nobody's listening to me. Kicking chairs, throwing books, hitting people, biting, running.
Yeah.
And I've had all of them. So safe spaces are essential because that teacher who already has a class where unfortunately I see a lot of loading. And I say loading because you see students that have a lot of the same behaviors are in one teacher's class because they feel like she has really good classroom management.
Yep.
Okay, she has great classroom management in a neurotypical classroom. But you just put, 16 kids with ADHD and ODD.
Right.
And seriously. So that's stress.
Yeah.
Right? Because benchmarks and stuff. But behaviors. That's the point. We see the behaviors. So then we have to treat them, but they need a lot of one-on-one because even small kids groups are challenging, right? It's kind of like wrangling cats. I'm a huge believer in social emotional learning though. So incorporating those social emotional learning tools into day-to-day practices, day-to-day classroom schedules can be beneficial, and being mindful. So sitting with them because it does work. I know it works. Sitting with them and helping them to find that quiet space for themselves, find that peaceful place for themselves so they can de-escalate because the goal is to help them learn how to de-escalate themselves.
Right.
So there's less loss of learning time. They can return to class, keep it moving. You know what I'm saying? Instead of putting little boys with behaviors into, I can't remember what the classroom is called, but it's a self-contained classroom for children just with behaviors. They don't have any learning challenges per se. It's just behaviors. But when you have somebody that's running, and when I say running, I'm running out of the building.
Right.
Okay. Or threatening to jump from the second store window. What do you do with them? Right. We tuck them away. We put them in a room. Sound familiar? And I mean, as the community, does that sound familiar? We tuck them away. We put them in a room and talk about it.
Yeah. Yep.
It's good. It's good, Shanta.
So we have to acknowledge those behaviors, recognize they're coming from a place, and then address them one-on-one. Help them find that vocabulary. Because again, it goes back to communication. Right. And even with nonverbal students that are on the spectrum, they know limits and boundaries. And that's why structure is so important.
Yeah.
So if we put in the time, we make the investment, even if it's signing, singing, playing music, there are ways to communicate. We just have to take the time to find that way and implement it effectively.
So I love what you've just shared for a variety of reasons. I'm listening and we were talking about barriers a little bit earlier. And one of the greatest barriers that I believe beyond the stigma is financial. And so, there are a lot of people who would love to get therapy, right? And maybe there are, a lot more Black men who want to get that therapy, but they're not necessarily able to because of financial. Right. Now, I know there are tons of resources available, and I know you can speak to some of those things. But I love what you just shared because what you've given us a little bit, and I want everybody to kind of, replay this a little bit later. Obviously, we're educators on here, and we were kind of talking from the vantage point of the classroom or in the building, this kind of thing. But you can take those same strategies as a parent.
Take it home.
Absolutely.
And implement that at home.
Yep.
And so everything that I'm hearing Shanta say, and she made a really nice kind of I guess, segue, for lack of a better word, or a relationship, a relation to us tucking things away in the house. And so culturally, I mean, look, we might be one generation removed from that, but we definitely knew Uncle Bobby or whoever that he don't come out much, right? But generation, one generation back, that was a thing, where, he don't come out the room much. We're going to leave him there. And, I think it's really important, what you shared about, it's acknowledging these things. It's learning to understand that for all of us, most of us, any type of expression that's coming out of us that is negative is a symptom of something much deeper. And we are often reacting to the symptom of someone.
Right.
And so if we can just pause for a moment when we're dealing with our young folks, if we can just pause and realize, okay, they're acting like this because of something else. And instead of just going in on them because there's a symptom that we see, it's take a step back. Why are they acting like this? So I love what you've shared. And for, those who are viewing, please go back and watch that and kind of listen and think about some ways that you can bring that into the house, because maybe you can't afford therapy. Maybe these resources are hard to get to. Maybe the barrier is that you don't have time. Maybe you're working 2 and 3 jobs. And I say this because I know actual people who are working literally 3 jobs and raising 2 teenagers or preteens, which is incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
And trying to manage and be present and trying to work through, just helping them in the class and this kind of thing, especially in this virtual space. And so maybe the barrier is that they don't have time, right? But if they can pull some of these strategies out that you're even just sharing here, that we've talked about, that take place in the classroom, or that we would use as, administrators and leadership within schools, that also is something that would, I believe, benefit someone who might not be able to. I'm sorry, that's an alarm on my all the things. Goodness, sorry, guys. That's something that would benefit, I believe, someone's household structure, right? So thank you for that. I definitely wanted.
Can I say a little something about that? Like when it comes to receiving help, like you cannot prioritize it more. You can't prioritize it enough. When it comes to mental health, you and I, Rajette, we talked about this earlier last weekend, and we if we're not emotionally sound and mentally together, we can't do anything right. Like nothing else will work. Like the rest of the body will not work if our mental health is not stable. So it was not. Thank God I have the finances to pay for therapy. Like it wasn't cheap, but it wasn't expensive to the point where I was like deciding whether I was going to pay for lunch or go to therapy. It was okay. I'm sacrificing some money for the betterment of myself, my marriage, and my entire family. So I'm not saying that. I just don't want people to think that it's going to cost you a lot of money to receive therapy. It's not. It's going to take you time, right? Because if you don't get any services or any therapy, it's going to just drag on, and things are going to get worse. Like diabetics, if they don't take care of themselves over time, it gets worse, and then you have to cut off something, or you die. Literally. Like, is this something that you want to do? Like, I'm not trying to be dark or morbid or anything, but this is just the reality of it all. Like, either in my heart, either I get really angry and I turn into this really angry, mad person, or I learn how to deal with the things that I've gone through, and I become a better person. My wife becomes, she thrives. My daughters, both of them thrive out of it, and we become a more functional family.
I love that, Des.
May I piggyback off of that?
Go ahead.
So I liken self-care to a car. And Des said if your mental health is intact, then nothing, but it works the same. Like if your physical health isn't good, your mental health is impacted. So we really have to make sure we're performing that routine maintenance, right? And families may not know, but contact your school counselor or contact your school social worker, because as I said, I'm a school-based community therapist. I meet people in their homes, or other private spaces where they're willing to talk.
Yeah.
So I'm coming to you. You don't necessarily have to go, 30 minutes up the road or pack a lunch and all that stuff. Right. Because we do want to address this.
Yeah.
And we do want people to know that there are resources out there, so that it is not, a back-breaking expenditure.
Right.
There are what are called Apex grants. They provide funds for mental health care services in underserved communities, because we are endeavoring to make sure that children get the tools that they need.
Right.
And families too, because we provide family services as well. But they are out there, but you have to be willing to accept the help, because teachers, social workers make referrals all the time.
Yep.
And we call and they don't schedule. You might do an intake, but then you don't schedule individual appointments.
Mm-hmm. So
recognizing that I can see your child at school all day long. No, I can't bill for that. But I can see them routinely as long as I'm allowed. But that family support, that back end, is really needed, because that's like fixing a hole in this wall, but this window is broken over here. Right. So you still got all this coming in. Yeah. We have to fix everything.
Yeah.
So that we can seal the structure.
Love that.
Right?
Good. That's good.
Love that.
And please just be open to the idea of something different, a different way of communicating, a different way of engaging your child. And trust me, I know what it's like to be a tired parent. I have 3 daughters.
Oh, Jesus.
Yes. Okay. But you have to make that time. You have to listen to them, and you have to listen to hear and to understand, not just to rebut, not to go back on what they just said.
That's good.
You know what I'm saying? So be open.
Yeah.
That's good. I love that. I was thinking, Desmond, earlier when you were talking about how, if we're not dealing with our personal stuff, how it just kind of, it's going to manifest, right? And so I can't remember if I made this analogy in the last episode or if it was just in our talks offline.
Right.
I remember a gentleman telling me years ago that, Rajat, you can only hold a beach ball underwater for so long. I remember that changed my whole life.
Exactly.
I was doing a ton of stuff. And again, at some point I'll share my story and all why I'm such an advocate for mental health. But I had just gone through a ton of trauma, and it was compounded trauma. And I was in an environment where I was doing just a multitude of things and just kind of go, because my default setting when something happens with me, I'm like, okay, let me just dive into all the things. That's kind of my thing. So it's like, I don't want to feel, I don't want to deal with it. Let me just busy myself. And a lot of people don't realize that is a mechanism, a coping mechanism. Absolutely not healthy. It is very, in some cases, doing other things and making sure you're operating in self-care. Okay. But if you're not doing that, and you're just diving into all of the things, that's just another escape pattern. And
excuse me, doing the most is deflection.
Yes,
it is absolute deflection.
Yep.
So I went through a season like that where I was deflecting left and right, and I didn't know any better. I mean, it's just, again, culturally, I grew up with a mother and family, aunts and uncles on my mom's side who were raised in the segregated South, East Point, Georgia, so Atlanta, Georgia, and during the Civil Rights Movement, and they were active participants in it. And so then I come along, and I feel sad about something or feel some kind of way, and I got mom and aunties like, oh yeah, suck it up, don't cry, like that. that's life. I'm like, okay, all right. I mean, I guess because y'all lived through Jim Crow, so okay, I guess I can endure
Right.
it. Right?
Yeah.
And so, as an adult, I just knew manage all these things, right? And so this gentleman, who I was in a leadership capacity over a substantial amount of people, and kind of some volunteering that I was doing, and this gentleman who had worked with one of a very, very popular Christian psychologist who's authored a ton of books and this kind of thing. He was a good friend of his, actually. But he saw me after a meeting and he said, I want to talk to you for a second. He sat me down in the corridor and he said, Rajette, you can only hold the beach ball underwater for so long. And I remember, like I said, it just changed my life instantly because I thought about that. And if you know anything about me, I think about all the pieces of that. And instantly I'm like, man, right. Because if I hold the beach ball, then now my arms are hurt. Some part of my body is going to be stressed out trying that, right? And at some point, I will fatigue. I will do damage to myself. I will overexert something in the actual manual, physical moment. I might feel strong for a while, like, yeah, I got this. But eventually, that beach ball is going to come flying up out of that water, and you and he at that point had challenged me, to get some therapy. He didn't even know what I had gone through, but it was one of these, it was like he could see it, and I guess he had worked with, these authors and they were, psychologists and this kind of thing. He was able to just pick it out. And I was so thankful, for him and just sharing that with me. I think, as it pertains to what you were sharing, Desmond, I think about that with our kids. So as someone who's parenting, right, or you're a guardian over someone, I want to kind of get out of the teacher lane for the moment as we kind of get to the end of this broadcast. It is a matter of talking to your kids as well about that very thing. Like, okay, like you're holding these things in, like it's gonna come out. It's going to come out with you kicking Timmy. It's going to come out with you breaking glass in Mr. Smith's office. It's going to come out, and I'll share even something my own therapist, mentioned to me a few weeks back, as I was dealing with some grief. I had a loss of a family member recently. One of the things that she mentioned, she's just like, look, you have a history of, not dealing with it, right? Like not grieving properly, right? And I've learned how to do that, but then every so often I'm like, I don't want to feel this, right? And so, she was just challenging me, and she's like, look, it's going to come out. It's just going to come out either healthy or it's going to come out terrible.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, and it's talking with your kids about that, showing them and modeling for them, some positive behaviors. And so I think these strategies that we've been talking about here today are certainly strategies that can be taken, for our viewers. You can begin to use some of these in your own household, in your own families. I want to kind of take a quick shift here. So again, for those who didn't see episode 1, please catch episode 1 so that you can understand the context, the full context of what we're talking about with regard to Desmond. He shared, like I said, a very heavy, very deep and personal story, that he and his wife experienced, and it was centered around loss. And so, Des, I just wanted to kind of shift a little bit and kind of go back to that. I have a couple of questions here, but one of the things that stuck with me from our conversation last week was, you mentioned, and I will say this much, you mentioned the loss of your child. And that was a lot of what you communicated. What was so interesting for me is that in all of my 43 years, I don't think I've ever heard a male express the loss of a child in the way that you guys did lose a child.
Right.
I've not had these conversations with men, and I was like, gosh, like those who I know who have lost children have been married. The ones I know, they've been married. And I've certainly heard the conversation from the wives, the mothers, the grieving. I see that collectively with mothers. I'll see mothers connect with other mothers about it. And I had not at all heard the father perspective until interviewing you and just hearing just how this manifested, right? And so, I think I asked you a little bit offline, do you know any fathers who have talked about the loss of a child, you know, where you guys are talking collectively as a group, or are you sharing these things, or are you just seeing that people who maybe have lost a child in this way, maybe you're just seeing the men just act out in a certain kind of way versus having those conversations? Have you seen this?
Yeah, I mean, I've got several friends that have gone through similar losses. It doesn't even have to be a loss. It can just be a disappointment about a child, like a child that may come out, and then a couple years go by and you realize that your child had autism. Like, that's traumatic, right? There's a number of things that the child has to go through, and then there are things that the parents have to learn and go through, and that's not that's not normal as well, right? But the guys that I know that have gone through similar traumatic experiences as myself, it is not a part of the conversation. As you know, guys, we don't talk about things we don't talk about. We don't talk about marriage. We don't talk about relationships really. But we do talk about sports. We'll talk about money. We'll talk about our jobs. But we don't talk about matters of the heart, right? Which is ridiculous. Like, the first time I had a conversation with a guy, a good friend of mine, about a matter of the heart was when I was 40 years old. Like, girls talk about this stuff when they're in preschool, when they're in elementary. Girls will talk, and they'll talk, and they will talk, and they will get together and they'll talk. They'll go get some wine and they'll talk. They'll get on Skype. They'll get on whatever media. They'll find a way to talk. Guys, we'll go to the man cave and we will sit and chill by ourselves and wallow in our own pity. Like, and that's what a guy does. But the first couple times, it's weird because, me and my friend, we were sitting there having a conversation about trauma, and we're both like, why haven't we ever talked about this before? Like, like, we've both going through the same stuff, and we've known each other for decades, and we've never talked about this. I have another friend, he went through divorce, really ugly, bitter divorce with his wife. And I'm like, dude, you should go to some counseling. Like, it's nothing wrong with it. Like, before they officially, went through divorce, I was like, you really should go through some counseling with her. You never know what might happen, right? Then when they divorce, I'm like, before you get into your next relationship, you really should go through some counseling. Like, you and your family has gone through some trauma. And then, he now he's, married. I'm like, you really should go through some counseling. And I mean, how many times can you say that? But I mean, I'm going to keep saying it. Like, I believe in it, and I know that it should be done. And then with some other guys, I want to shout out my former roommates, because we over COVID, over the whole pandemic, we would meet every Thursday night for hours. That's awesome. Some of you guys know them: Rob McConnell, Will Parker, and Mike Jameson.
Wow.
Those are my dudes. Like, we would sit for hours. My wife would be like, "Oh, you got meeting with your fellas tonight? That's great." Like, she'd be excited for me, right? Because she knows that guys don't sit and talk. Like, we would literally sit and talk from 7 to like 10, 11 o'clock at night. And she'd be upstairs watching TV. When I get upstairs, she was like, how was it? Right? How was
it?
Popped
out at this point, right? Like, you're just
right. Right. I'm like, man, it was great. We're going to do it again next week. So every Thursday night, we called it. I'm not going to tell you what we called it, but it was a great. It was a great time. We talked about marriage. We talked about relationships. We talked about money. We talked about sports a lot, because that was like one of our connections. But the fact is that we were able to have conversations that were not so generic or so surface. We were able to dig deeper and have some stronger conversations. So
that's good.
So it's a rarity that guys talk about those things, but I'm like pushing for more guys to have these conversations, because it needs to happen.
That's amazing. I'm so glad you shared that. Look, I might have to hit them up and see if you guys can be on the show, like the four of you, right? Like that would be
It'd
an
be
amazing
fun.
thing. Yeah, I think we would have a good time with that. Shanta, did you want to contribute? We're wrapping up here in a little bit.
Absolutely, I do. One, kudos, love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. Because I have a group of friends that I meet with every Friday since the pandemic started.
Right.
So it's great. That support is necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Two, though, I heard you speak of it in the past tense. Please tell me y'all didn't stop. Keep it going.
Oh no, we still, yes.
Okay.
The way that we normalize, right, is by making it something that is part of our everyday.
Yeah.
So keep it going.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying you have to open it up, but definitely keep encouraging others to do that, because I have recognized in all of my 42 years of life that a lot of men don't, but some men do. But when they do, they're in those small, intimate spaces, those small groups.
Yep.
Small groups are great.
Yep.
Yeah.
You love small groups. You get a lot done in small groups. Y'all know that. Y'all teachers.
Right.
Some of these small groups. Okay.
Right.
So, but having those conversations in small groups, it's like popcorn. Pops out, goes over there. So you're having those conversations in different groups now, but we're spreading it. We're normal. It's becoming a thing that we do. We're talking about these things. And again, that's part of the stigma, why a lot of men may not. Culturally, we spoke about, but again, I push back on the cultural, because it is a very human thing for people to tell their little boys, this is the way boys behave, this is the way boys talk, this is what boys talk about.
Yeah.
And that pain and that hurt, those are typically things that, in the words of my bestest friend, Ricky Bobby, you bury deep down inside, never to be brought up again. But that's not the way it works. We know that seeds planted in the ground, they sprout. So we have to make sure that we are encouraging and watering, those positive habits of expression and talking through it, and making sure that you are connecting with what you're feeling. And again, being okay with saying, I need or I accept help.
Yeah.
That's another huge hurdle.
Yeah.
So kudos to you guys for just getting together as friends, as peers, and having those deep conversations and encouraging each other to do that work, because you typically don't say the words without some kind of work coming after.
Right. Right.
Especially at this point in our lives, knowing the type of men that you are, and know that work has come. Yeah. So kudos.
Truly kudos. So shout out to the squad.
Yes.
Definitely. Thank you, Shanta. So Shanta, before we go, how can people get in touch with you if they wanted to connect? So first of all, Shanta is based out of Atlanta, Georgia, right? Atlanta. And so any of my family that's watching.
Hey, I'm here.
Okay.
I got some family out there too, so.
COVID safe. Let's carport pool or something. But no, you can reach me on slhayes.com. And for weekly motivations, I am at SL Hayes Speaks on all social media. So weekly little nuggets, words of inspiration, let you know any specials that I'm offering on coaching or books or things like that. But I want you to be mindful that, again, fit is always important. We talked about fit last week. So thank you. Yay.
Sorry. See what happened was.
It's okay.
Sorry.
No. It's fine. But, yes. So we want to create spaces that are safe for all persons. And SL Hayes Speaks represents not just individuals, but also educators and communities. We want to address the needs of all parties, because it is a village and we must work together to effectively lighten the load of reducing the stigma that is associated with talking about mental health and then getting help for any challenges you might be experiencing. So
awesome. Thank you so much again, guys. I think we did a great job. Had a great, wonderful time with you per usual. You guys will join me again at some point in the future. I'm sure of that. But thanks for just everything that you offered in the way of vulnerability and resources and just your voice. It's so needed in this context and during this time. So appreciate you. For my viewers, thanks for tuning in. I'm going to get this under an hour. I promise you that. Promise you that. That's coming. This is the second episode, and there's a lot that I'm going to be kind of trying out. So bear with us. Thanks for joining us. You will be able to catch the rebroadcast as well. So we appreciate you. Thank you. And in the meantime, continue personally to try to shift some of these narratives that's gone out about us that are negative and sort of redefining and tearing down stereotypes. That's what I believe I'm called to. That's what I do. And this is a space for that. So until next time, we will see you. Talk to you later.
Later.
See y'all.
Later.